A parent writes, my son is struggling academically in most subjects in 10th grade. I believe he has ADHD, but I want to have him tested for this. Does that sound like your child? If it does, here are some thoughts that may be helpful. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the connection between ADHD and learning. ADHD is a diagnosis of a syndrome condition that troubles many, many, many children these days. The diagnosis is more common than ever. In fact, you hear people refer to ADHD in the workplace whenever we have trouble paying attention. Whenever somebody has trouble paying attention, I hear people say things like, "Oh, that's my ADHD," or "That's his ADHD." But ADHD is a diagnosis where attention skills and impulsivity in particular usually are getting in the way of being successful in everyday activities. So it's not just the behavior per se. In fact, if we just looked at the behavior of most 2-year-old boys, that looks a lot like ADHD, but it's expected at that age. It's developmentally appropriate, and it's not getting in the way of their developing and doing what they're supposed to be doing in life. By the time you're in 10th grade, of course, ADHD could be a significant issue. But just because a child has ADHD or has that label or that diagnosis doesn't really tell us much about how they learn. It may tell us that they have difficulty with attention, either sustaining attention or screening out distractions. It may tell us that they are impulsive sometimes. But that doesn't really tell us how they learn. It doesn't tell us anything about their memory skills. It doesn't tell us anything about how they reason with information. It doesn't tell us anything about how they actually manage to get work done and keep track of information in their minds while they're planning or working through a multi-step math problem. That's what we're really going to need to know in order to understand why this child is struggling in most subjects in high school. Another question this may raise for you reminded me of my own experience, in fact, when my kids were growing up. I raised 3 boys. 2 of them were diagnosed with ADHD in high school. And the question I always used to ask myself was, why not earlier? Right? What? And there are a lot of kids who are diagnosed with ADHD, but not until high school. And what usually what that means is that they've managed to cope. They've managed to work around their challenges. They've managed to deal with their lack of attention because they just are very smart. They put in a lot of work otherwise, or they do something else that helps them compensate for the struggles that they're having with their attention skills. And so it's not at all uncommon. For that to be the case. And of course, the diagnosis of ADHD permits a couple of things to happen, one of which is that you need a diagnosis in order to receive medication. In my case, one of my boys decided to take advantage of the opportunity for medication and felt that it helped his ADHD symptoms. The other did not, chose not to. So there are lots of different responses to that, but that's one thing. And the second thing is that it does often in a school setting provide an opportunity for accommodations, preferential seating, sitting where there are fewer distractions, maybe even extra time on tests, because sometimes it takes kids with ADHD longer, in fact, to get through work because they tend to get off track or get distracted from time to time. But again, if we really want to look at learning, we're going to have to look at all those other things. It could be that attention is the core of what's going on. But it could also be that there are other things going on. As I said, processing speed might be one thing. Memory skills is another thing. How we reason, what their various learning strengths are. So it's really important to start to understand that. And especially because ADHD, might not even be diagnosed. By the time that kids are in high school, in my experience, the diagnosis relies very heavily on their own input. And if a child says that they have difficulty sustaining their attention, then the medical practitioners are likely to take that into strong consideration in making the diagnosis. But it may not be the problem, it may not be the only problem, it may not be the most basic problem. So once again, looking at other cognitive skills and understanding how an individual student learns best is going to be very, very important. It's not to say that you shouldn't get the evaluation to see if your child has ADHD, but that's a choice. Some find that some parents want to do that because they really want the extra help that they might get from the school. Others don't want it because they don't want that label and that label to carry with them. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. Every situation, every family is different. So you might consult with your physician for sure, because that's the person who will, psychiatrist or your family physician, who might make that diagnosis. But in any event, if you have that diagnosis, someone has been determined to have ADHD, it's certainly not the end of the world. And there are lots of, when we get underneath and find out what their learning strengths are, we can have a big impact. We really can help them use those strengths to be more effective and to be more successful across subjects, and even by the time they're in 10th grade. So those are my thoughts for today. We have a webinar that we created for parents to understand more about cognitive skills and how they can help their children who might be struggling with learning, really at just about any age. So I will put a link to that webinar in the comments, and look forward to seeing you again soon.